Well, while much of the industrialized world focuses on emissions reductions, developing countries like India are still struggling to bring energy to their people. The number of Indians with no access to electricity outnumbers the entire U.S. population. So what will cutting emissions mean to India? Clean Sky's Dan Goldstein continues his reporting on this debate surrounding India's role at the climate talks. Good afternoon, Dan.
Hey, Susan, how you doing? Well, when India comes to the table in Copenhagen in December, the issue on many minds will be power, not emissions. India has the third biggest coal reserves in the world, and 85% of its power comes from fossil fuels, much of which is coal-fired power plants. And so to India, cutting emissions means they have to change the power mix from coal to nuclear. India has the world's fastest growing population and a surging economy. So when it comes to climate talks in Copenhagen, its message is simple. We need electricity first, emission cuts second.
Will the nuclear ultimately displace the coal? You would hope so, because nuclear power is non-carbon emitting. But in the end, as India is only consuming 600 kilowatt hours per person per year, and the United States is consuming 14,000 kilowatt hours per person per year, India needs electricity. They're very undercapacitized.
And with 40% of India still without electrical power, the government knows it can't sell saving the planet at the expense of keeping 400 million of its citizens in the dark.
India, what we have said is, on a per capita emission basis, we will always be below the per capita emissions of the developed countries. But in addition to that, we will take on a series of nationally accountable mitigation outcomes. But the popular notion that population growth is causing India's emissions is not true. As I said, it's really the consumption patterns of the developed world. It's the lifestyles of the developed world which has caused the emissions and the global warming and the climate change.
Last year, Congress approved a deal brokered by President Bush that lets India buy nuclear power technology on the global market. India had been cut off from that trade since it tested a bomb in 1974. India's government has announced plans to accelerate its nuclear program, building nearly 500,000 megawatts by 2050. The target is 100 times more than the current capacity of India's 17 nuclear power plants.
It's an argument of arrogance where a developed country can say, India, keep your people at 600 kilowatt hours per person per year, when we're consuming 14,000 and we can turn our air conditions off and on whenever we choose. Clearly, as India's middle class of 300 and 400 million people, more populous than the entire population of the United States, just in the middle class alone. As it gets wealthier, they're going to be consuming more electricity. Their electronics industry is booming. Obviously, the information technology industry in India is booming. So their electricity needs will grow. And are we to impose that moral imperative on India? No. But they appreciate, as we heard today from the minister, Jairam Ramesh, it is in India's interest and India's imperative to be looking out for global warming, because they will be badly hit in the Himalayas and the Sundarbans with the monsoons. Any of the climate change issues are going to be horribly horrific for India.
Now India says it wants to help bring the world together on climate change and not to tear it apart. And Ramesh told Clean Skies News that Western countries need to rein in some of the, quote, evangelical rhetoric surrounding climate change, while developing nations, too, need to tone down their polemics, in his words. Bottom line, India at Copenhagen would not be a deal breaker, and they said, we are going to be a deal maker. Susan.
So they seem to really sort of be softening their stance now as the big talks get closer.
A little bit. They've changed some of their rhetoric somewhat in saying that we are going to be basically a player. They want to be involved. They want to be in the middle of this because, as you heard Rob Summers of the U.S.-India Climate Group, they know that they are going to be facing some of these issues 20 and 30 years down the road.
Right. Okay. Dan Goldstein, thank you.